Welcome to this Skillick Explains video, and a question that comes up regularly in this economic environment: how much cash should I hold? So investors are understandably nervous. Let's start with the background, if you like. Plenty of reasons. I've recapped them in other videos, so let's go through a few of them. Volatility is high and markets seem to be up one day, down the next. Central banks are busy at different speeds. They don't all agree on this. Tightening, and tightening means raising interest rates, pulling back on the quantitative easing lever, turning it into quantitative tightening instead. Firms, especially in the tech space, if you're following that, are starting to lay off staff at a quicker pace than they used to, and earnings are becoming a bit less visible, if you like. Analysts are starting to sort of, get a bit nervous about what future earnings look like in this environment of rising costs, rising interest rates, and so on. So as a result, investors and consumers, quite sensibly, are holding more cash on average. But the question is, how much is enough? So let's start with why too much cash can be a bad thing. Sounds a bit of an odd thing to say, but it can be as a long-term investor. I mean, number one, interest rates, yes, on cash deposits are rising, but they tend to lag behind inflation, all right? And historically, they tended to do that. So bearing in mind that you are actually taxed normally on a chunk of the interest you earn, depending on how much you earn, that creates even more lag, and it means that in real terms, you're not really keeping up with the rate of inflation. There are limits that apply. Financial Services Compensation Scheme limits to the amount that is protected, if you like, with any one financial institution. Now, the limit, £85,000, is relatively high for a lot of people, but nonetheless, that can require, for people juggling more cash than that, a little bit of care. And there's opportunity anxiety. As you sit on a big cash balance, let's say, there is always that question of, well, when do I try and invest it to earn a higher return? Whether that higher return is going to be generated by something like IOUs, bonds, for example, equities, or something else. Now, having said that, we do need to keep some cash on hand. It's a big mistake to just invest everything and to sort of create your own personal liquidity crisis, something we're seeing amongst institutions in different parts of the market right now. So what are we going to use cash for, first of all? It's good to sort of sit down and say, well, rather than just a random amount, what's it needed for? Well, there's rainy day money. There's those emergencies that come up, and they can vary. It can be a leaky roof, the need to suddenly replace a car or part of a car, one of your kids suddenly saying, oh, crikey, I could do with some money to duck some hideous debt charges that I'll otherwise incur on credit cards, for argument's sake. So it can come from all sorts of directions. So a rainy day fund is quite sensible. Then for investors that have got that nailed down, there's the opportunistic cash. In a market that's volatile, there will be opportunities to top up holdings in favourite stocks, for argument's sake. That's not market timing. It's just taking the view that, well, if something was, I liked something yesterday and it's cheaper today, why not, if you like? And there's a psychological comfort. Going to bed at night thinking, I do have that cushion. I may not need it. Maybe I've overcooked it slightly, but it's there. So how much should it be? Combining that rainy day, opportunistic and psychological sort of comfort trio. Well, here's some rough guidance. Around 6 months of regular monthly expenditure of an individual is probably about right. 6 to 12 where somebody is responsible for other people. So for example, they're responsible for a family. No doubt about it, those costs are going to be higher, and the sort of comfort blanket most people want will be higher as well. But ultimately, those are only guidelines. The exact amount will vary according to what advisors sometimes call your natural attitude to risk. Because there's no point in telling someone, well, keep 3 to 6 months worth of regular expenditure to one side if they're naturally much more nervous than that. And equally, if you've got a known big cash outflow in, say, a year's time or 15 months' time, yeah, it makes sense to have that set aside as well. So these are very much rules of thumb. Now, whatever amount you end up putting into cash, you need to try and generate the best rate on it. for the period where it's going to remain as part of your cash fund, if you like. So obvious advice towards the end of this video would be do shop around, keep an eye on rates because they are moving and they're moving most of the time at the moment. Try not to lock in for longer than you need to for the simple reason that if inflation keeps pushing interest rates up, then you may be able to get a better rate by being a little bit more nimble, if that makes sense. And also don't forget, if you lock in, you won't be able to get the money back necessarily without incurring a penalty, if you can at all. And do consider there are some out there, a comparison platform. It can be pretty difficult to keep tabs on all the accounts, and then you've got to go through the hassle of moving money from one to another, and that is sometimes not as easy as just made it sound. So there are some platforms out there that enable you to sort of easily compare quite a few of the accounts in the market side by side, and then move the money for you once you've gone through some process loops. And that, for people with significant amounts of cash in particular, might be a little bit of an easier option. Okay, so there we have it. The question about how much cash to hold. Unfortunately, I don't have a magic answer to, but there are some guidelines. If you'd like to know more about this topic, then killick.com/learn, the Investing Principles tab. Not a bad place to go. There's also my guides, which talk a little bit about these, the three pots, the rainy day money, the foreseeable calls, and lifetime savings, and so on. And that would be editor@killick.com. It's the multicolour guides at the front there. And then there's Confidant, where our wealth planners quite often talk about the need to keep a certain amount of cash on one side and the planning tools that will help you to manage that. And for a copy of Confidant, again, it would be editor@killick.com.